This evening is tough for me because I'm interviewing a guest in Australia where my wife and I would have arrived yesterday for her birthday trip. So we will vicariously celebrate. Please welcome Paul KH Lau, halftime Sydney, halftime Canberra.
Oh, thanks, Stefan.
And let's get some of the audience angry right away. Sydney or Canberra? Sydney, of course, has the big international reputation. Talk about the merits maybe of Canberra.
The Merits of Canberra. It's a smaller town. When you're kind of a bit older, don't mind a bit of I wouldn't say dullness, but kind of just quiet, something a bit quieter. And Canberra's got that sort of feature. It's close to the bush, has kangaroos. Even in the outer suburbs, and you can go for a ride. You can go for a bicycle ride and be in the vineyards in about an hour. So it's quite nice that way. It's a good contrast, good change from being in the big city, which I also spent a lot of time in Sydney, by the way. So as you know, um, got the best of both worlds.
Vineyards would I really don't know anything about wine tourism. Would this be a good spot in Australia? Where would you recommend for the wine tourists?
Well, when you do finally bring your wife out to Australia, it's worth going to Melbourne or vice versa from Sydney, and spend a few days here, or at least a couple of days, one full day, and maybe visit a winery, one of the bigger ones that will be open during the week. Because it's not a, although it is a wine, we do have a wine region. It's not a very it's not famous and it's not a very big wine region. So there are a handful of the larger vineyards who open during the weekday. So I'd probably do it that way.
All right, and you are Australian born and bred, as I understand, and
Um, yeah. Yeah, well, bred. Yeah,
okay.
I come from a family from Hong Kong all those years ago, back in the 70s, and but pretty much known Australia for most of my life. So I probably sound very Australian. I think very Australian, maybe, and yeah.
Well, that's good thing because I keep mistyping your name as Paul HK Lau because
Ah,
I love Hong Kong. I spent a semester studying there and try to visit every year, and we were there in January. So
yeah.
what does it
Uh,
mean? Mhm.
yeah, the KH, sorry, you can quite um, you can ignore that if you wish. It was just there was some confusion in the early days of Facebook, and I've made my name more specific that way. Yeah.
You mentioned you think Australian. What does it mean to think Australian for people that maybe have only seen Crocodile Dundee or or pictures of koalas?
Yeah, I have to be careful here because I may be living in a bit of as a bit of a bit of a chamber, and I suppose from time to time we all kind of can be guilty of that. We look at our country or we look at our culture as being different to so different to everyone else, which probably isn't the case. If you traveled enough, I'd imagine you'd agree that we're not that different in terms of the way we think and the way we care about others or the way we do many things. And the more you know other cultures, I find that we're more similar. So I guess I'd set that in a somewhat frivolous way when I said
Mhm.
Australian, but I suppose I was more referring to the carefree nature of people. Um, I suppose having come out here from Asia at the time, which was still very much in development, coming here to a very prosperous society and a country that's been prosperous for quite a while. I noticed you straight away notice that the relaxed nature of the way people behave. Um, I guess that's what I'm referring to, and I suppose the when I first started traveling, most people I do meet were people from the West. It's more recently now that we see uh, people from the Far East, other than Japan. So yeah, back in those days, I think it was. I think when I came to Australia, it was a very different society, and over time, I think I've settled in reasonably well.
You've had a long career both in public service and the private sector, and my limited business experience in Australia, it seemed to my perspective that although in everyday life people are carefree, as you mentioned, that the business culture retains a lot more formality than I typically see, say, in the United States.
Uh, I think the business society has changed a lot throughout my life here. We've come out of in the 70s and 80s. We've come out of an era of protectionism, and over time we've had to engage with Asia, our regional partners, a lot more. So I've seen a lot of changes there. Some of it good, some of it not so good, depending on what your point of view is. Some differences. There are a lot less strikes these days than there were back then. In fact, indeed, very little back in compared to the 70s.
Mm-hmm.
We had manufacturing, a lot more manufacturing back then, but it was a lot of often it was to supply the local market, and and the products were of questionable quality. Some of them, particularly cars. So probably similar to the United States. I'd imagine there's some similarity there, but I think Australians really do work a lot harder these days. We don't just work a lot harder, but we're also more engaged with the rest of the world, and we've had to do that through out of survival. I'd imagine.
And let's talk a little bit about your business career and maybe entering an odd point is when you took a break from it. So you took a break on a corporate philanthropic secondment to Tanzania. So talk about how I'm familiar with people taking a break from their career, but it sounds like this was with the blessing of your employer, and talk about that concept and what it did for your travels as well as your career.
Well, okay, that happened in my 30s, around the about 2005 or so, and I was fortunate enough to work for a very large American corporate healthcare corporation based in New York, and they had a at the time had a program going where they would sponsor an employee for up to a period of 6 months
Hmm.
to work in for a select number of NGOs, and um, being the person I am, I put my hand up for that, and I was accepted to a role in Tanzania. It was a marketing role, and so it was very much in keeping with my skills and my role with the company. But that and following that episode, I resigned from my company and continued with them for another year. So I think it was which kind of in a way was fitting at the time because I was looking at ending that career in private enterprise. So and following that, I joined went to Canberra and joined the public service. So it was anyway. The time in Tanzania was very enlightening because I wasn't traveling. For the first time, I wasn't traveling. I was spending time living in an
Mm-hmm.
environment,
Mm-hmm.
engaging with the people. But as an expatriate, sure, but you are also I was also very much involved in projects in up country, and that's where you get to see the real situation of way things are, way social and economic development is, and yeah, it was good for that reason. It was a bit difficult because no, we could be talking right now and the lights will go out. So and for a while it was a bit of a novelty, but after a while it did get difficult. But you know, it's hard for you and I to complain about that because for the people living there, it's like that every day of their lives. The problems they can could come with being in a not being economically challenged. It's difficult, and you know, I wouldn't want to complain about it because you know people have to live. Big parts of the world have to go with that every day of their lives. We can always just come back to the States or to Australia whenever we like, of course.
Yeah, and I've been a bit more recent than your experience there. My trips have been much more limited, but it's been interesting for me to learn about technologies that are leapfrogging what I'm used to. Mobile money, and these how rapidly it's changing, in East Africa and several really all over Africa that I feel like they're building financial systems that are more effective, more efficient, certainly more streamlined than a lot of what I deal with banks in the U.S. So I've been learning a lot.
Yeah, I've read and come across that. I haven't been back to the continent or sub-Saharan Africa since that time, and would be really interested to see what's happening because there were a glimmer of it at the time. You
Yeah,
know, they went straight from no telephone to mobile telephone.
yeah.
Uh,
Mhm.
that's a very simple example, and I imagine much greater progress would have taken place over these last 12 years or so.
Did you have much chance to travel around the country in a leisure sense?
I did for a little while afterwards. Not as much as I would have hoped. It was just to the neighboring East African countries,
Hmm.
and it was rather fast, really, given the circumstances at the time. But yeah, it was interesting, and it was quite enjoyable and quite educational for me. I do want to go back, but it just haven't been able to, and probably would be looking at doing it probably next year. But as you know, the last few months, things got a bit slow, and kind of things have gone against most people's plans, I'm sure,
Hmm.
including mine.
In Tanzania's national park, so I've actually only been to Zanzibar in Tanzania, and I was planning a trip probably this September. I was looking at Gombe Stream National Park, Jane Goodall's base for the chimpanzees, and other parks. I mean, there's some incredibly famous parks, and there's so many parks and seasons to go, and that I've even got the Brat Guide laying out the national parks, and I read the whole thing, and I couldn't decide which to visit. They all seem great, but it's so hard. So have you visited a number of the Tanzania national parks?
I have to disappoint you here. I haven't. Safaris and isn't really something it's not really my thing.
Mm.
Although I've heard a lot about around the there's it Ngorongoro crater.
Mhm.
Quite a lot of people go there. That's quite a popular spot. It's difficult certain times of the year, particularly wet season. So you do have to pick your time to go there. The people whom I I recall talking to who've been there, they will also do the do like go up to Arusha during
Mhm.
that as well, and you know, spend some time maybe going up Mount Kilimanjaro as well. So that would be probably good around the north of the country, and then work your way into north of the country, starting at Arusha up to Kilimanjaro if you choose,
Mhm.
then go across to um, Ngorongoro crater and across, and then finally across to Monza on Lake Victoria, and then that
Mhm.
could bring you into the other East African countries like Rwanda and Uganda. You probably would need. It'd be a lot more comfortable if you had your own transport, though. I relied on public transport, though I'm sure things are different now, but you know, it wasn't easy at the time.
Excellent. And how about places in Tanzania? You said national parks and safaris aren't really your thing, but places that you encountered in your work that for cultural experience or whatever interested you during your visits that most tourists wouldn't be aware of.
Uh, I'm not sure about most people would tourists wouldn't be aware of, but I mean, I guess I travel just for the people, just for the culture, and
Hmm.
I'm I should pay more attention in natural beauty, but I tend not to,
Hmm.
and maybe because I tend to stay around towns, cities, and settlements. But I do like football, so and music, so that kind of thing tends to, well, particularly football in East Africa tends to gravitate. I tend to gravitate towards it, and I lose myself in that environment and interact with the people in that environment. So um, that would be something I that tends to kind of take me on that tangent.
Hmm.
Um, Work-wise, it's mostly working with colleagues, but also in the countryside. So mostly village people and communicating and working, collaborating with village elders and you know, local politicians and things like that.
Fantastic. And have you taken a lot of tours of football around the world? Does that figure into your trip planning, or you go to a match when you see when there's one in town?
I tend to go to match when I see one in town. I have that said, I have attended football tournaments officially, and mostly for um, to take photos and to provide photos to images to an agency.
Oh.
But more recently, it's just been with this image in town. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if it's in Spain or in no the first division in Spain or not. I actually quite enjoy it when it's in the other end of the spectrum. When you're talking about, like, let's say when I start traveling the Pacific, then a match between two teams in Tonga or something like that. That gets me equally as interested, and it's actually more interesting because it's not something I normally see, and it's not
Hmm.
something I see, but it's also no, it's no less competitive at the other end as well.
Hmm.
But there's a certain romance about it that you don't get in the big leagues of Europe. It is no, when two countries, two Caribbean islands play each other for a World Cup spot, it means a lot as well to them.
Yeah. That's incredible. I'm thinking of the nightly football matches on the runway in Tuvalu, and yeah, just that casual experience dropping in, and yeah, where it
Yeah,
becomes a real festival.
yeah, that too. Even on the base of the pyramids, some kids kicking the ball around there.
Mm.
Amazing where you can play football. There are a lot of impromptu stadiums around the world that won't make it in big pay TV coverage, but there's a bit of fun to that, and certainly when it's at the competitive level, at whatever level, there's a real rivalry and there's a real sense of importance. It's 90 minutes when the world's not going to end. Basically, that's how I see it for them
For
anyway.
an uncultured American, it seems like it's more than 90 minutes. I still don't know how they keep adding minutes and quite how that system works. So
Well,
I need to learn it.
firstly, I'm very pleased that you're referring to it as football as well. So, coming from America.
I'm doing my best. So it's I was thinking, you mentioned the Pacific Islanders. I live in Seattle now, and there's um there's a large Pacific Island population because we're on the ocean and the fishing industry. And I read I think it's actually I think it's a cricket league that some of the Islanders have every weekend in the summer and a big barbecue. And I didn't make it last summer, and I was going to head out here, and it's one of those that the actual sport is the least important thing going on for all the generations of families out there. And
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I haven't been to Tuvalu yet. I will get there eventually, but it's a long way, um, even from here. But I think often it's more a cultural thing. Yeah, I quite agree. It's the football is merely backdrop for society and the way society interacts, but it plays a very important part in people's lives.
you mentioned it sounded like that you also do professional level photography, that you're taking photos of these matches. So let's get the quick tips. How does somebody photograph a live sporting event?
I wouldn't use the word professional next to my name, thank you. And
I said
I'm very
quality,
careful using the
professional
word photographer.
quality.
I'm just someone with a camera and with a bit of interest. But yeah, fast moving objects, and you want on the subject, so use a very slow lens like a 2.8 aperture, and so you can use a very fast shutter, but also capture very narrow depth of field because you want to focus on the person. In the case of many villages, like African villages, for instance, the background isn't terribly appealing either. So by doing that, you can cut out a lot of the I wouldn't say rubbish, but clutter in the background and focus on the subject, the moving subject instead. Um, Often, probably also worthwhile considering shooting into the light. Sometimes I know it's goes against goes against what you normally do, what many may normally do, but that again take away the rubbish, the clutter in the background, and focus on the subject. But you get enough of the background to build a backdrop
Mm-hmm.
and give a kind of a, how do I say it, impression to the viewer what the place is about, but you want to focus on the athlete or the tussle that's taking place between two or more athletes. So
Some
that's my very simple. That's probably all the knowledge I know.
Well, that sounds fascinating. As you said, you gave a counterintuitive advice about into the light. If someone is only carrying a smartphone, what can they do?
Ah, you're asking me these questions as though I'm some sort of expert, and please don't get that wrong impression. But look, I do a lot of travel to a smartphone these days, and I think it's adequate in what most people want to do. And these days they're pretty spontaneous. Do you press the button and it clicks straight away. So it's no, it's very kind of it has its advantage. It's very compact, so you can pull it out at a
Mhm,
moment's notice and not disturb, not distract us, that not kind of interfere with the mood in the moment.
mhm.
But it also has it packed enough features that if you use it, then you can get whatever result you want. Okay, you can't do a lot of things like what I'm talking about, setting aperture. Not that I know how to anyway, and setting the speed of the lens and all that. So it's a pretty basic, from an optical point of view, it seems pretty basic, but from electronically, technologically, it's a very complex piece of device. Um, you can do a lot by just composing the shot. Um,
Mhm.
Often you may not get exactly what you want, but I believe you can over time you can. Like I learned to take away or de-emphasize some aspects of the background so that the viewers you want to guide the viewer's eyes to what you want them to see and how you want them to interpret it. So you can cut out certain things by just through composition or through cropping, um, which often you'd be quite successful that way in taking out certain undesirables and emphasizing certain aspects of what you want to show. So I wouldn't underestimate smartphones. There's a lot of really good smartphone photos out there that I wonder how they did it, but and I'm sort of learning over time. But
And for your actual camera, what is your what body and lens of choice or your brand? What?
I use Nikon, and that's not, and I probably that doesn't come with there isn't as much equipment available in Nikon as in Canon, and there's enormous rivalry between the companies. So I gone down the Nikon path early, and the further you go down, the more you had to stay with that because it's just too expensive to replace everything, and you never do that. Oh, I wouldn't. I have a D2X is um, it's a very large, very bulky thing. It's quite old now. It's about 12, 15 years old now, or at least 10, 12 years old. I bought a secondhand quite cheaply, and they're as tough as anything there, but they also weigh like a brick as well. So unless I'm really in the mood for it, and there's really a reason for me to take it, then I don't tend to tend I tend to leave it at home for a lot of
Mhm.
travel too. But and with that, I use a 18 to 55 2.8 lens. So 18 to 55, which is pretty much standard. It gives a bit of wide angle and and normal range, and 2.8 because I like a fast lens. I like to really like emphasize the subject, and so I can't. I've tried using consumer lenses that are 3.5 to 4 or something like that, and 5.8, and I just can't do that. It's just I can't enjoy doing it. So it's either the brick or it's a phone, and lately it's been more the phone. So maybe I've been a bit lazy. I should get back into these exciting projects that I've always had in the back of my mind to do.
In February, I replaced an old broken. I've never gone past point and shoot, but I bought a better point and shoot, I'll say, and I was all prepared to learn it now because I haven't been traveling. It's just sitting in my drawer. So I will. One of my intentions was to learn how to use a camera better and organize all my photos. If you seem like a very organized person, is how do you manage and organize and share your photography?
Firstly, I must say, don't let not traveling prevent you from taking photos. Although I shouldn't be talking because I'm not doing anything right now, photographically speaking, because photographing things around your neighborhood it's often more challenging than going to somewhere you've never been to before and you're totally excited about. That's the challenge of photographing everyday things and making it exciting or interesting in your own mind and in the mind of the audience. Um, yeah. So you were saying, sorry.
I can tell you have a bit of an organization
Oh yeah,
streak to
yeah.
you. So
Sorry.
organization and sharing. Yeah.
Yeah, not the best memory either, but I think it's more recent though because I worked in a role in government in that required a lot of archiving and one to be very organized. It's government and the way government works, you have to be very accountable for things.
Mhm.
And I've learned a lot of my business approach in that area, more organizational skills in that, so which is something I'll be forever thankful. So these days I tend to approach traveling in a more business-like fashion, tend to plan ahead, tend to document, and tend to do all the things that I would do if I was back in government. So yeah, I suppose I am reasonably organized. I'm more bureaucratic than organized though.
So in terms of your photo collection, how do you organize it? How do you store it? How do you share it with people? I think you've even done exhibitions.
I've done one exhibition
Okay.
there, so and I intend to do more when I get around to it. When I spend some serious amount of time in one location. Um, I have to say I just organize in folders. I don't have fancy software for these things, and I don't even know how to use the Apple the stuff that the software that's preloaded into my devices. I tend to just put them in folders in a large hard drive and back that up, and
Hmm.
that's really all I do. But then if you put it in the folders and you date the folders, then you can always go back to
Mhm.
it's easy to go back and look through things when you need to.
We can tell you're very humble, but we want to hear about what it's like to put on a photo exhibition.
My one exhibition was in Canberra way back in 2011, um, and it was about football, it was women's football, the Australian women's football team. I was in China, Chengdu, in China at the time of the women's Asian Cup, and this was a few years after Australia was accepted into the Asian Football Confederation. So the country has yet to made any great achievements as on a tournament in terms of in Asian tournaments, and that was the first time that particular tournament was the first time that the Australian national team has been successful in uh, in claiming a trophy or a tournament in Asia. So it was the Australian women's team was the first Asian champion in any gender or in either gender or any of the age the youth disciplines or complete like this in all the national teams or youth and men or women. So it was a big occasion for the sport in particularly for women's sport in the country. It was a time just a couple of years after following the start of the Australia's own women's national league. So and there was a fair bit of interest in women's football, and I thought, being part of that occasion, I felt the need to, and having a big collection of photos, it was a time I thought it was a good idea to put on an exhibition and particularly focus and picture towards the football fraternity here in Canberra. And I believe it was very well accepted. We had the CEO of the Canberra Football Federation, and along with a midfielder who was in Chengdu um, to launch the exhibition, and the federation was also good enough to sponsor the exhibition as well. So it all went down pretty well, and I'm pretty pleased with the way things turned out.
Excellent. Tell us about netball.
On netball, well,
Yeah, I've happened by it just walking around streets in Australia and wasn't aware of both amateur and public parks up to professional leagues. It's something that I don't think gets much visibility outside of Australia.
there's a lot of visibility is mostly I believe mostly in the Commonwealth countries. So I look, I don't know too much about sport, but I can say I can give you a bit of an idea. Um, Australia and New Zealand, I believe, are a bit of rivals in the sport. They're the two superpowers. They play
Mhm.
every year. Netball, from my understanding, is a very fast game. They can't run with the ball, but they have to, you know, the players have to be very fast and have a very high amount of reflex, because if you can't run with the ball, you have to know what to do with the ball before you even get it. And
Mhm.
I have photographed netball. It's very hard to get it right at the right moment, because
Mhm.
action is very um, it's very much based. It happens like almost in a snap. It's like some animals you see in nature documentaries. They strike the predator, but they do it in a
Mhm.
split second. And you have to get the moment right in order to capture that. So I'd say it's a very difficult sport to play well, because you have to be very fast and be very fast in a very short period of time.
Mhm.
And you
Excellent.
also, unlike basketball, you're shooting a ring that is smaller, higher, and doesn't have a backboard either.
Yeah, it is quite a seat. It looks like there's tremendous skill, and as you say, the speed is impressive. So I I think I'll make more of an effort to investigate it on this next trip. We try to get to Australia every other year, and as I said, this one has been disrupted, but we're hoping by next year that'll be possible. And when I look at some of the things you've done in travel, it sounds like you're a pretty early couch surfing member, and I wouldn't necessarily. And you also mentioned taking public buses around Tanzania. That's not what we might assume of a business executive go on to a government career. So, tell us about couch surfing from the early days.
Oh, yeah, couch surfing in the early days. I was told about it from a Tanzanian colleague. Um, yeah, back then when there were, and there it was, you get onto the website and there's a big banner celebrating 40,000 members.
Hmm.
And I got involved with that. So my first couch surfing experience was around Kenya, around Tanzania. I hosted people in Tanzania in my
Hmm.
apartment. It was a lot of fun, and it was. I think we all share that similar interest. Look, I think these days it's very big. I think it's a profit organization now.
Hmm.
Um, but it's because it's very big. Maybe I'm just a lot older, and I'm not so much connected with that movement. But not to say I won't in the future. But back then I got the impression it was a very much more a hardcore lot, and those previous stories still there, but
Hmm.
but there are also no the universe within couchsurfing is a lot bigger now, so you may have to look harder for I may have to search harder for the people I want to meet and I want to
Hmm.
attract.
Yeah, I suppose that's inevitable that when it grows in scale and more money gets involved, there's going to be a shift.
Yeah, and in a way I'm disappointed, and I've heard from some other couch surfers that has been using this service for a long time, is that the intentions of some of the travelers are not the same as used in the past. It's there's more focus towards saving money than in interaction, which is that's a little bit disappointing as well. And that's kind of in a way drew me away from the movement.
Hmm. Excellent. And I want to get into your travel style, but first, I mentioned how organized you are. You've planned out the next decade. It's been a little bit disrupted, of course, with the current situation, but you're planning to add about 60 new countries to your travels over the next decade. So talk about how you're thinking of structuring this decade of travel.
Well, there's that part of me who want to expand horizons, but there's also that part of me who want to also go back to places and understand the places or cultures a lot more deeply.
Hmm.
So I am wrestling between the two. That said, I have yes, that's correct. I have made a list of trips I want to do over the next 10 years. It may not all happen. It may turn out very differently, but no, it's kind of a wish list. And so I would chase that, and I will chase that in the fullness of time. But it won't be. It won't. I'm no longer going to be just doing it. Well, I have for a long while. Just I think part of me is thinking about where can I can go and how many countries, but I shouldn't really be thinking that. I should be I don't think that's really how I really should be traveling, and I'm looking at ways to understand countries more deeply as well. So maybe some of those trips will also be augmented with maybe spending a month in a city, for instance, and just losing myself in the city. And that's probably how I would do a lot, rather than just yeah, those trips itself is more a it's an aspirational list, but I think I want to, on top of that, want to revisit places that I've spent time in the past, and you know, give it the respect it deserves.
What are some of the cities you've mentioned? Cities a particular favorite that you want to lose yourself in for that period of time?
Uh, I think certain cities in Latin America, let's say Buenos Aires, let's say Rio, Bogota. Uh, um, I can think of a number of European cities. I'm hesitant to name ones I haven't been to because although I would like to spend time in those places, I like to start sometimes the bigger cities like the Athens and the um, possibly Madrid or something, because I find that those sort of cities, when you spend enough time in it, you look beyond just the
Mm-hmm.
the surface, beyond the postcard surface. I might spend some time in university or at a college or something like that, or just in some random neighborhood, and let the instincts do the make decisions. And no, I think of bigger cities, because bigger cities there tend to be more things to do, more opportunities, and culturally they're very rich. And
Mm-hmm.
yeah.
And do you walk around the cities all day? How do you immerse yourself in it? You sit at the cafe and watch the world go by?
Um, yeah, we will do a little bit of that. I'm not really sure. It's just something that I managed to do or try to do. I suppose these days in the era of social media, it's a lot easier to find some opportunities.
Mm-hmm.
There are groups, and there are, for those things you and I do. There are groups you can engage with, and that gets you a bit of a start. Or through sport rather, or through going to football matches, or even yeah, just whatever feels good at the time, whatever I stumble across at the time, more than likely.
I'm interested that Latin American cities were the first that came to your mind because it seems that a lot of travelers that have been to you've been to what 91 UN countries, uh, travelers that have been to 100 more. That Latin America seems to get a mention farther down the list, and it doesn't jump to people's mind as quickly as it does for you. So talk about that appeal.
Well, I do want to learn a second language. I know a little bit of Cantonese, but hardly counts these days because I can't speak it that well, and I can't read or write.
Mm-hmm.
So I would say Spanish. I like that to be my second language, and it is a language that's spoken and used in large parts of the world, and it's
Mm-hmm.
I hear it's not terribly difficult. I don't think it's terribly difficult if I do choose put the effort in. So and traveling it's a great way of learning a language as well. Um, so immersing myself would actually force me to use to speak and to practice more often. Yeah, so and I do like many aspects of the people there. You go to Columbus, they're very musical. It's like loud blaring music everywhere you go, and a lot of dancing and things like that. So I guess I for that reason it's an environment that I'm not used to, and I'm not very different to the environment that I spend all my time in. So I suppose Latin America would have is a standout.
Yeah, it
Yeah.
seems like even if music isn't playing, people are often dancing to the music in their mind. Are you searching out any particular style of music or just whatever's playing, whatever's local?
Uh, yeah, there's many aspects of music in Latin America that appeals, and I'm not an expert in music by any chance. I tend to buy buy music in the old days where you can buy music on CDs. I tend to do that. Plus, I have a bit of a collection at home. But it's whatever's good and often catchy, and it's also the environment in which the music's consumed, live
Hmm.
venue. the availability of live venues and things like that. So I guess music and food, they're two great things I tend to do when I'm out and about.
Okay, your food choices. What are the cuisines you love, the food you seek out?
Uh, I tend to. There are many different ways to cook and serve seafood, and that's an interest area. I probably would, if I had a choice, I always take the sea over inland
Hmm.
for that reason alone. Um, yeah, it's tropical places tend to have interesting things and tend to be very hot, plentiful. So yeah, seafood and the many different ways it's being cooked and consumed with alcohol, consumed with bread. Um, bread is also nice as well. I like this, which quite varies in different parts of the world.
My wife is the seafood one, and I'm the bread one. So I want
Really?
your for both. But it's her rule is that if it's only deep fried, she's not even interested. It's like because she's saying you could deep fry anything, and then it tastes it tastes fine. So it's got to be steamed, grilled, poached, anything but deep fried. So what are some of the seafood picks around the world that meet that baseline?
I quite agree, and I quite agree. And coming from southern China, around the southern China region, I would agree that steaming is the way to go, and don't overdo the food. Don't let the food do the talking.
Hmm.
It doesn't need to be smacked in and marinated with strong sauces and to the point that you don't even know whether it's one fish or other fish. So um,
That's the Parmesan crusted fish fillet we have in the U.S. That's unidentifiable fish.
well, like I mean, um, look, the less you do, the better. And I think you can't go wrong with olive oil. You can't go wrong with in Asian food with steaming seafood in with things like garlic or ginger, chili, and just enough chili just to give it a bit of an edge. So those things, and I like I like the way they do it in southern China. I like the way they do it in Southeast Asia, in Greece. Um, Southern Europeans do it, the Italians, and it's no simplicity is good in that sense. I quite agree with your wife there.
Do you cook? Could you tell somebody that's never steamed anything how to steam a fish?
I think you just got to check it a lot. I do steam. You got to check these things. You don't want to overdo it because overcooked seafood, it's terrible. It's yeah, it just becomes rough and nothing like it should be. So I rather under than over. And once you've under rather than over, and even once you've taken out of the steamer, it's still finishing it off. It's still cooking anyway. So uh, I think timing's important, and the more you do that, the more familiar you are with your equipment, how much steam is giving, how strong your stove is, and how much steam is it's being generated, heat is being generated, and how thick the meat is. So you play those off against each other and work it out that way.
Fantastic. I think that's a great tip about that. It keeps cooking even when the steam is off, so you don't make sure it's 100% done while it's
Yeah,
still.
I say that with same with meat, and you're also talking to someone who I like, who like to eat a lot of things raw, including seafood, including beef. And so for me, I wouldn't mind if it was anything between not cooked at all to just below well done, just below right, or medium or three quarter for meat in that case. So I like under. If I had to choose, I'd go under, err on the side of under.
And then let's get your undercooked picks for Canberra and Sydney for visitors, seafood or meat.
Uh, do both. We have really good beef. When the country's known for its beef, but also a harbour city. So I would spend some time in the fish markets when I get to Sydney. You can take the tram there.
Mhm.
Um, they're building a new one, and if you come in about 2 or 3 years time, or 3 or 4 years time, you'll see the brand new establishment.
Mhm.
But there are also a lot of multicultural. enter ethnic neighborhoods in Sydney as well, particular large contingent from from uh, from Vietnam, from the Middle East, from various parts of the Middle East, um, Chinese. So in the suburbs, there are very good Chinatowns. Well,
Mhm.
not maybe not China, but Vietnam and ethnic neighborhoods, and you'll find some real gems in there as well. If you like cooking, if what and if you want to sample the food cooked your way, I think that's the way to go as well. These places have very good markets. They're very vibrant, so you can have your lunch there and spend a whole afternoon and take home what you want to do back in the apartment or wherever you're staying.
And I'm just thinking of our 2018 when we were in Brisbane.
Oh yeah.
A day or two before we were leaving, I'm always curious about Costco's around the world, so we had stopped there, and they had a giant, I don't know how much, a kilo of cooked shrimp or something like that. And I'm allergic, so it was entirely for my wife. And it was like a 8 a.m. flight out of Brisbane, and she's trying to finish them, still finish them before we depart. And in the Brisbane lounge, a man actually from Hong Kong went to the attendant and said, "Can I have the shrimp like she's having?" So that was self catered, but I can say from her experience, she really loved the quality, even as I said, picking it up at Costco.
Yeah,
Um,
seeing the size of the pizzas in Costco, I can only imagine what the servings of shrimps, well, prawns we like.
yeah,
Yeah, and I wonder, I'm glad it wasn't considered a security risk bringing prawns through through into
I
the
was
department.
asking about. I'm trying to remember exactly because I think there was a debate because in Brisbane especially, the airport security is very fussy. I've been stopped a few times for thought like you have the little backpack and they really want to extra weigh it and inspect things. And I think got a water bottle one. So yeah, they are very almost persnickety. And I was worried that they would say because of the little spiky point
Yeah,
on the
yeah.
top, that's like a weapon.
Mm.
But
Well,
we
it hasn't bothered me. I have known to eat the entire prawn, shell, head, tail, and all. So maybe it's not so risky. And yeah.
yeah. I I uh I used to be able to eat them, and the first allergic reaction I had was a large pot of drunken shrimp in
Mm.
Tianjin one night. So after that, I've not been able to have more than a few pieces without the reaction. So you like cities, but you also told me about two modes of transport that you're interested in, and they're I think ones that people dream of or maybe intimidated by. So motorcycle travel.
I haven't done much of that. I've only got my license last year, my proper license. Before that, I was riding. Well, I shouldn't say anything, but in some places, when you hire a bike, they don't ask. But so I'm now more serious at looking at renting bikes and doing some overnight rides. Well, going for several days around certain parts of certain countries that I'm in. I mean, the easy one seems to be Southeast Asia, where there's there are a lot of bikes around, and
Mhm.
so it's quite safe. The bikes aren't very powerful either. You can get the scooters, but I want to go beyond that. I don't think that's really what I want to do. I like the idea of getting a bike and going across whole countries and multiple countries, and I like to experience that freedom and to just go off and not know where I end up that night and just stop wherever and uh, and camp or stay at a lodge or whatever. Though, in order to ride a bike, though, I think I need to reduce my amount of luggage, which I think that would be a discipline I'll be forced to be able to do.
Hmm. And another that you mentioned that you're looking at is ocean travel by merchant freighter or mail ships.
Yeah, I heard you from another member of this group. You went to, is it St. Helena? Is that right?
Yes, he popped up in the comments. Austin Fu, he's watching.
Yeah.
He says hello.
Yeah, he told me all about that, and but I've always had a thing for freighters before, and I noticed that there are agencies that one can secure trips on freighters across oceans, and I like to do that. And as long as I have enough reading material and listening material, and I'll be good. I can probably even do a photo essay on let's say 30 days from let's say from Southampton all the way to Rio. I don't know if it takes 30 days, but but that would be a good. I'll be interested in actually documenting that in my collection. But yeah, I'm not so much I'm not a cruise ship person. I haven't been on a cruise, but maybe I'll do it one day. But I like the idea of freighters. I just like the idea of that in this industrial ship, and you can see what's going on, and I'm not. I know it's not comfortable. But that's fine with me. I just need a place to rest, and I can socialize with the staff. I've seen Austin's photos. They're wonderful. I mean, you guys partied with the crew, and you play cricket on the deck, and it was kind of like you make your own fun, and you became a you go from strangers to become a community within that ship. That's the feeling I got anyway.
Yeah, it was fantastic, and I had never been on a cruise. It was nothing like any cruise I imagined. It's very sad that
Mm.
that particular RMS Saint Helena has been retired, and I don't know if there's something like that in the world. The game they were playing on deck was called Quoits, which I
Oh,
had not heard of. But yeah, I mean, there was even a very tiny swimming pool that I mean, if it was steady, it could hold a handful of people. And there was one British gentleman that religiously would get in, even if the ship was going up and down, and you would see him because it was near the window for the what they called the sun lounge, and you could almost see him like flung in his little swimsuit towards the window with each rise and dip. It was an incredible experience, and I regret that I didn't know about it and take advantage of it sooner. And I've been on the lookout. One I might suggest to you, not quite a cargo ship, but upon asking people for similar experiences, I was introduced to the Alaska Marine Highway System, which is a public ferry system in the state of Alaska. It even continues down to Washington State, where I live. Uh,
oh,
I took I took a specific route that runs twice a month in the summer that goes from Homer to Dutch Harbor, and so through the Aleutian Islands, some very small communities, and it had a bit of a feel like that. Before the virus stuff, they had a lot of political disturbance over budget cuts between the government, the governor, and the legislature. So a lot of things were in flux even before the current situation. So don't know what form it'll take in coming years, but that some of those communities, other than emergency medevac flights, have no other access to the outside world on their neighboring communities. So yeah, even I've heard depending on the sailing you take, it can be the one school on the one island visiting the other school for a few days of sports matches and then coming back on the return of the ship.
yeah, I'd love to do that. I have to get some more information on that, and I hope I can catch it running when I'm yeah be there at the right time for that to happen. Look, I'd also like the idea of it's similar to what you did in St. Helena. Although that was a
Mhm.
a trip to get there. I would like to do something, explore what travel options there are around Mauritius and from Madagascar
Mm.
out there and between the islands out there, Seychelles and all that. I'm sure if you hang around long enough, there'll be a cargo ship, and likewise
Mm.
the Pacific. And to me, that means a lot more than just getting on a plane. I get on a plane in time and
Yeah.
buy a ticket on a smartphone, but it's not quite the same as doing it this way. And yeah, very much like to learn more about this kind of direct but indirect way of getting between um, Washington State and Alaska, bypassing Canada, I would imagine. So you don't actually need to land on Canada. Is that right?
Yeah, that I'm trying to think of any stop there. I believe not. Whereas all the other cruise ships, there's interesting things around what are called the cabotage laws. So there's different of the major cruise lines. There's different times of the year where they have to go, like say between Seattle and Vancouver, just for an overnight. so then they can reset their season. So some of the shoulder season cruises can be interesting. But the ferry system, yeah, the reason for the Washington State routes is specifically their car ferries, so they're bigger vessels, and a
Mm.
lot of people are buying vehicles or other large equipment and bringing them up that way. So I didn't take the whole Washington, but they have throughout the state of Alaska they have different vessels and a whole route network, and it's um, they're state employees, so you don't. They say if you tip them, they have to give it to the state government. So they said don't bother tipping. It's a whole different experience,
Oh,
and
that is so un-American. You have to hand it over to government, the tips. Oh,
yeah, yeah, and it's interesting. I mean, they have limited berths, but a lot of people say on the vessel I was on, the what do they call it, Rusty Tusty, the Tustamina, um, of the capacity of around I think 100 or so people. There's only available cabins for about a quarter of that if you want to book them, and so a lot of people are sleeping in the lounge chairs, or you can bring a tent and camp on the roof, which you it is a bit noisy and windy, but some people enjoy camping out there, so it is a special experience.
sure. In the summer, it will be. I imagine it'd be quite nice if you had earplugs as well. Um, I think most people. I certainly can sleep in many different environments. The noise doesn't may not affect me so much. Yeah, there's some really good routes around the world still that still exists, thankfully. Sorry, I'm ashamed. I kind of feel bad that I missed out on the St. Helena run. Um, but yeah, there's so much to discover. Even just on that alone, I know Austin has this thing for islands. You know,
Mhm.
fancy going to islands that no, so that's the in my mind I've never heard of before, and it's fascinating. And but getting there is also fascinating as well. And this is one way to do it.
Yeah, I can think for a lot of people in our group that our interests go to Cocos Keeling and Christmas and Lord Howe Island and Norfolk Island and the
Mm.
Chathams, and all these different places in your neighborhood, so to speak. That when you tell people about them, if they've never heard of them, they don't always believe that they exist.
Mm.
That it's
Mm. Exactly. I'm learning myself, so yeah.
so you've reconfigured your travel, as I understand. You're officially retired from your entrepreneurial activities, and you're spending about half of the year travel and half of the year on other projects. What are you planning, and how are you thinking about the resumption of travel for you, given the current situation?
Well, I don't know how. Well, yeah, up to 6 months, 4 to 6 months a year. I haven't actually done it yet for too long, but I'm working on it. I'm formalizing the process. How do I do it? I think I tend to be more spontaneous. So I tend in the old days plan something a year before I do it, like book the trip, book the travels on it, particularly when I'm working. These days I'm not working in the office. I'm sort of required occasionally at the business, but it does allow me to do a lot of things on the run using a computer or well, on the road, and that's the great thing there. Now I tend to I suppose I enjoy myself when I'm at home. So I tend to focus away and focus on the things I need to do at home. So that's but these days it doesn't take much to organize just to do the bare basics of the organization.
Mhm.
A lot of things can be done, as you know, online. You don't have to. Gone are the days when you have to do a lot of legwork to get things together, to get even the basic things together. But yeah, it's the kind of existence I've longed for a long time. So it's great to finally have have got there to be able to actually put in action.
And where travel restrictions allowing,
Uh, yeah,
where's the trip that's coming? What's the
I don't really know. I don't know where this is going to end. How this is going to play out. Certainly, we've done a really good job in Australia and New Zealand, and they're talking about a New Zealand, Australia, and Pacific bubble. So maybe I'll be going to New Zealand and Fiji for the next 10 years, depending on. You never know.
Yeah, I
Uh,
read articles about Fiji wanting to insert itself into that bubble. Yeah.
yeah, Yeah, so there's that, but I also read an article by from a where they top online travel agencies in Australia, and he doesn't believe there'll be any travel to Europe or the United States this year. So I think I can probably not. I'll probably look at the furthest I'll go maybe Southeast Asia. If that's the case, the furthest I go Southeast Asia this year, and that will be and that would be assuming the optimistic as well. More likely it'll be just New Zealand and a few Pacific Islands. I can I mean I can make fun out of that too, and I can make that into a bit of an adventure if I want to as well. So anyway, there are far greater problems that the
Mhm.
world is having, so I can't
Mhm.
complain about that. I've lost a couple of air tickets because of the pandemic, which is far less a loss than than a lot of other people.
Yeah, that's a wonderful perspective, and I think we'll close with that sentiment and hope that it that situation soon allows you to embark on that decade of systematic and also spontaneous travel, and that we'll see you on the road as well.
All right, thank you, Stefan. Thanks. Yeah, thanks for the chat. It's been most fun. It sort of got me thinking about things as well. You've actually encouraged me to actually delve into my mind and speak about what I've been doing that I haven't really thought about. So I thank you for that.
Fantastic. Well, we'll bring you back for a part two as you've created your further manifesto and worldview to present to us.
Oh, thanks for that. And I hope someone actually gets to interview you as well, following your trip to Australia with your wife, and talk
Well,
about
thank you.
the experience and the wine experience, and if there are any other prawn experiences. Maybe not at airport, maybe somewhere else. Maybe.
That I can guarantee. There, I think there's one tonight, very local. But we've been hunting around for which supermarkets razor clams will appear, which is the Korean market sometimes have it, but they're all like 30, 45 minutes away, and we're calling and driving to try to get these. So that's the extent of our travels for the summer, I think.
Yeah, like us all. Yeah.
Take care. Thank you, Paul.
All right. Thanks, Stefan. See you.